Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So the relationship between Calus and his daughter Keitel is one that has been filled with confrontation, but deep down there's a strange connection that the two still hold. In their own strange way, this father and daughter still have the connection that one has with family. It tends to lend itself more to assassination attempts than an actual healthy relationship, but still, the relationship between father and daughter is still somehow there. And there's a strange trinket that sort of best exemplifies how even in the face of the dying breaths of a universe, they still have some strange, twisted line of communication, and Calus still holds some form of twisted familial care for his daughter, even if Keitel very openly defies it. That trinket is the new exotic sword from the Duality Dungeon, Heartshadow. Today I wanted to break down the relationship between Calus and Keitel, explain why Heartshadow has some form of significance, and ultimately talk about whether the relationship between the Empress and her father might be leveraged as a means of pulling Calus back from the darkness. So I think it's worth explaining briefly the reasons why Keitel really grew to hate her father. In the lore there are really three major reasons. Namely, the restrictive trappings of her place as the Princess Imperial, the tutors that taught her to oppose the goals of her father, and his cruel murder of her war beast Milos. In the lore tabs of the various dungeon weapons from Duality, as well as the Empress lore book from the Season of the Chosen, we can start to see how this relationship slowly got defined. The New Purpose lore tab, for example, tells us how Keitel saw Gaul in the gladiatorial pits and was given determination to see that she would also be able to choose her own fate and determine how she would live her life. In the Empress lore book, she trained with Amuna Rath, the Evocate General and Primus of all legions, who would instill in her the knowledge of the threats such as the Hive at the edge of the Empire. In the lore tab for the Storm Chaser, we see how Keitel trained with Gaul, who was at the time the Primus of the Red Legion and who was nicknamed the Ghost Primus for his albino white skin. Finally, we see in the lore tab of the Unforgiven that Keitel would never forgive her father for the murder of her warbeast Milos, who he killed out of jealousy because Keitel loved her pet warbeast more than she loved her father. All these factors combined together to cement Keitel's hatred of her father. But on the flip side of things, Calus was terrible in most areas of fatherhood, but still did hold some strange love of his daughter, even if that love is mal-expressed and I think is something we can all easily be contemptful of. You see, whilst he wasn't there all the time for her, especially due to either his rampant hedonism or actually dealing with the business of the Empire, Calus was sure to provide all that he could for his daughter in proxy. The finest of garments, the greatest of foods, and the wisest of tutors were all gifted to her, and these gifts were supposed to be made in lieu of his actual presence. Even Milos, Keitel's warbeast, was a gift. Granted, it was one that Calus would later revoke. But a parent being absent from their child means it's not easy for one to show that they are loved. This, realistically, is where all the cracks began to form. With an uncontested hatred of her father, Keitel was easily pulled into Gaul and the Consul's plot to take over the Empire. I've talked about the Midnight Coup at length many a time on the channel, and for those of you that don't know, there's a special edition booklet from the Destiny 2 Vanilla Collector's Edition that holds a little more detail about Keitel, as she was one of the main conspirators of the Midnight Coup. This booklet is where Calus commands us to kill the conspirators, and he even commands us to kill Keitel. But here, still you can see that strange love and hatred that he still has. He does want the best for his daughter, even in her death. He states that she can only be killed doing, and should only die doing, what she loves, being a pilot, and so therefore we will need to kill her in that moment. Even as she turned against him, this strange familial love exists between Calus and Keitel, even if it's not reciprocated. I guess some things never really change, even if they always take on a twisted aspect to them. Over the many years, We would not be the only assassins who would be conscripted to take on the conspirators, and in particular Calus's shadows would be able to dispose of many of them. Between the shadows, us and Dominus Gall, who killed the consul by strangling him, all of the conspirators are now dead, all except for two. The only exceptions to this slaughter are potentially Otzot, whose whereabouts are currently still unknown, and Keitel, the Princess Imperial, now Empress, who Calus was never able to truly kill despite sending a number of assassins to kill her. And we know that he did this because every time he sent an assassin after her, they were armed with a very special armament, a sword known as Heart Shadow. We learn more about that sword and the reason why Calus was sending it along specifically with assassins in the lore tab for the Heart Shadow, which reads as follows. Enactine is one of the most resilient metal alloys we Cabal have ever encountered. It is a quantum mimetic mineral that when exposed to psionic energy can be locked into a specific shape, even when it is broken, melted down, or reduced to a fine dust. It can be returned to its quantum-locked form by touching a portion of it and remembering its previous shape. The ritual blade Heart Shadow has been remembered back into its original form countless times over the millennia since its mind forging. I first held the blade when it was passed down to me after my mother's death, and upon the birth of my daughter, bequeathed it to its rightful owner, her mother. And when her mother was no longer, it was my duty then to pass the blade on to Keitel. But for some reason she refused to simply accept the way of things. Even after she sent me into exile, I would continue to present the blade to her. But each time, Keitel would return it to me, broken, along with the head of the assassin that I had entrusted with it. Each time, I vowed to return the blade to her, one way or another. At some point, this exchange became more than tradition. It became the only way in which we communicated. I do not remember when. I choose not to remember. For remembering is pain behind my eyes and daggers in my chest, and the past cannot be destroyed. It lives on in every bitter recollection, until the end of time. In his own strange way, Calus still feels his duty to his daughter as any father does, even if it's expressed in literal attempts to assassinate his daughter with one of the gifts that she was meant to receive from him. It's an interesting note about the assassins because if you actually take Heart Shadow into the Duality Dungeon to obtain its catalyst, then you'll be able to see new enemies spawning within the dungeon. 3 assassin figures will all spawn at various different points, and each of them is very difficult to kill. However, they all assist you in the process of getting the Heart Shadow catalyst. At very least, the banners they drop when they die do. The assassins that came to bear Heart Shadow all died, but it seems clear, thanks to the special trait of Enactine, which Heart Shadow is formed from, that the blade was bound to be constantly sent back to Keitel by her father, even as she would have it destroyed each time, and it would still be able to be reforged. Of course, now that entire trend has ended. Calus is no longer able to send assassins after Keitel with this blade, because we have recovered the Heart Shadow, and it's been made clear that this cycle of communication between Calus and his daughter has now been put to an end. But even before this point, I suspect that a change came over Calus as he decided to more deeply embrace his role as the herald of the Witness. At some point in time, it might have been possible to reason with Calus and convince him to halt his crusades against his daughter and his own people. It might have been possible to create an uneasy but reunited Cabal people that might have stood in opposition, united against the Witness. But that possibility is clearly no longer in our grasp. I think we can more clearly tell that thanks to the season's lore book known as Voices of the Haunted. The text from the final entry of the lore book tells us about the nature of Calus's fall into desperation, how he is driven by the nightmare of his daughter, who has been haunting him without reprieve. Strangely enough, this lore comes to us at a point at the very end of the season, just after we've defeated Calus, and it's clear that this is at some point during the season of the Haunted because of the presence of the nightmares, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. I don't know if Calus in this instance is in a physical body, has completed his transformation and ascended into the pyramid. I don't know what's going on, but it does describe a physical body to the wasting Emperor. The lore tab reads as follows. Calus sees her, and he remembers her. Young and precocious, energetic and ambitious, a mind full of dreams larger than his own. Her intensity intimidates him. She imagines accomplishments he dares not entertain for fear of failure. The nightmare knows this fear. Its adolescent eyes meet his and bore into his soul, laying all his embarrassment bare. The nightmare knows this fear. Its adolescent eyes meet his and bore into his soul, laying all his embarrassments bare. It sees him for what he is, a deposed ruler, entombed alive in a golden sarcophagus and left to rot in exile, replaced by one more beloved than he. Always seeking the adoration of others, seethes the nightmare, wearing his daughter's face. Even from the witness. Silence, Calus grumbles. He instinctively reaches for his chalice, but it has long since left his side. It will abandon you, just like the Cabal, just like the Ghost Primus. The nightmare of Keitel smiles, sweet and crimson and full of hatred. Just like your daughter. I said be silent, Calus sputters. His daughter's laughter is a knife between his ribs, as it always has been. No one hears your edicts. No one obeys. Her voice fills the chamber and seeps into every crevice of his mind. She is Empress now. You are nothing. I made her, he bellows. I, Calus, the greatest emperor since Acreus. All that comes before me is prelude. All that follows is my legacy. I am the sun itself. A dying sun for a dead world. A legacy of ashes, soon to be swept away by the wind that is Keitel. She will never surpass me, he roars. She already has, the nightmare sings, and soon you will be forgotten. Calus's withered face contorts in anguish and angst. The nightmare is wrong, he thinks. Keitel will never be a greater leader. He will make sure of it, even if all that exists must pay the price. If Calus had a severance, his mission would be called jealousy or envy. I think this is the thing that will ultimately drive him into the arms of the witness. If we hope to someday delay Calus and forestall whatever he wishes to do next, I think our best hope is to excise that nightmare. In a moment of distraction and desperate times, perhaps the only time that we will be able to halt Calus in any way will be if Keitel lends us her assistance, simply by telling him that he is still loved as a father, and that he is and always has been a great emperor. But I cannot imagine that this will happen, and even if it did, I think that Calus might be too far gone to save. The witness has its claws firmly planted in Calus's mind. I think that we might be a little too late to pull back the Emperor from his new master. And if we are too late, then there's nothing for it. We will have to end the Emperor once and for all. That's all from me for now, though. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, and of course remember that you can also leave your own comments and thoughts down below in the comments section. We're still experimenting and testing the audio stuff out here, but hopefully things are starting to sound all the more better. We took a lot of advice from the previous video. Things should be a little bit louder, We're also going to work on rounding out some of the other bits of audio that aren't perfect in this, so yeah, let us know how things are going on that front as well. But hopefully, everything sounds very nice. Also, do remember that if you want more Destiny lore content, you can hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications, and as per usual, know that your viewership is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Parodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.